Hey everybody, today on the Nerd Marketing Podcast, Mike and I talk about the leadership challenges of a company at various levels, like 0 to 10 people, 10 to 50, 50 to 100, what kicks in when and how you overcome it. And then we talk a lot about company offsites. So we've got a management team offsite coming up next week in New York City. How to get the most out of your offsite, why you'd want to do an offsite, how to structure it, and our top 4 tips to improve yours. So I hope you enjoy it. It's a good one. What are we doing here, Mike?
Drew, we just got out of our all hands, and crazy to see the number of people at the all hands these days. I mean, we're well over 100 people right now, and the growth that we've had over the last couple of years is crazy. And it's super fun to see all the new faces show up sort of every time we have one of these all hands, but it makes you think about how we got here and like all the different phases we've gone through in such a compressed amount of time.
So let's talk. I mean, I love the all hands because I mean, we're at the level now where I don't know everything that's going on in the company. And so it's a good chance for me once a month to kind of hear what everybody's working on, see some faces, realize I actually have a company of humans.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about like some of the routines we do. So we're probably, I don't know, last time 120 people. That's what I heard, something like that. We do a monthly all hands. So that's the first Friday of the month. And we review the previous month's performance and accomplishments and challenges. And then we look forward to the next month and kind of what we're going to do the next month. And we do it in sort of this round robin format. I mean, the first thing we do is have the head of finance get up and talk about the numbers for the business. We talk about some big corporate OKRs. You and I might go deep on some of our core values and give examples there. Mm-hmm. But then we let the department heads kind of cycle through and talk about what they've got going on. And I think it gets everybody front and center, holds everybody a little bit accountable to the whole team. And it works really well. I mean, we started with one a week and we found that the feedback we were getting was it was like interfering with everybody's week too much and a bit redundant week to week. So we went to once a month, and that seems to work pretty well.
Yeah, I think this goes back. You and I have done this at previous companies together. I think the finance aspect of it is something that we've actually heard from a lot of folks is not as common, but very much appreciated. We did this at at Auto Anything, where we had our CFO stand up and really run through the numbers. Here's what's going well. Here's what's not going well. And the team really, really appreciated that level of transparency. Everyone, I think we found at a lot of these turnarounds, especially, a lot of the staff were sort of surprised when you told them the state of the business. Like, oh, I thought we were doing so well. Oh, we do $100 million in revenue. How can we be losing how can the company not be doing well? We're losing $10 million. What? That's crazy.
Yeah. And the turnarounds were interesting because you'd sort of level set with everybody, and then everybody got into how are we going to make money. They were all throwing out ideas of how we could save money or make more, and in our case now, I think we've just sort of carried that tradition forward. A lot of it's just rooted in a few books that made impacts on us. One of them's Powerful by Patty McCord. Or, you just treat your people like adults and, share all the numbers with everybody, right? There's no secrets.
And then it's also really hard at our scale and at the scale of a lot of the brands that we've run is to understand what all the teams are working on. I mean, we hear all the time, everyone sort of wants to know, and they want to know what's going on throughout the org, but especially, and even more so as a remote culture, it's really hard to keep everyone in the loop with everything that's going on. So people really get excited when they get a real preview and an overview of what all these different teams accomplished and what they're working on right now. We talk a little bit about the different phases of growth and how you have to think about structuring the org or managing the org as you go from, startup or really small to over 100 folks. And also, we've got an offsite coming up, a management offsite coming up next week, and how we're thinking about structuring that so that it's as productive as possible for our leadership team.
Yeah, those are kind of the two things we do. The two routines we found to be really valuable. One is the all hands virtually, and then the others are these meetups. In this case, it's the management team, but I'd say like every team has met face to face at least once through a year. I mean, probably twice in a different city. So we do a lot of that too. But maybe we start by talking about like the different leadership challenges that have happened along the way at different levels, right? Like I'm thinking back to when we started, or at both of our startups in the early days. Like when you've got under 10 million as a direct to consumer brand, typically means like 1 to 10 people working there. And so the leadership challenges there are the founder does everything. Like you hire, you fire, you got to make sure the customer service team comes in and answers the phone at 8 a.m. There's no
or
middle
you are
management.
if they don't.
Yeah. No one to delegate to, right? No hierarchy. Decisions get made quickly. Personally, I found like the first leadership challenge kind of kicks in, I guess we'll call it like at 30 people, maybe 30 million in revenue.
Yeah.
Where, most direct to consumer brands, like that's kind of when you're building out middle management. You've got your head of customer success or your head of marketing, and you're in this position where you can kind of delegate. So the challenge it moves from like, you got to do everything yourself to how do I delegate? How do I hold people accountable?
Yeah. And keep everyone coordinated too. So it becomes even more important as you start building out these management functions to ensure that everybody's rowing in the same direction. Also, something that we ran into constantly, especially in the turnarounds, was head of IT was like, here's what I'm working on this quarter because I decided these were the priorities. Head of customer success says, I decided these are my priorities for the quarter. Head of every other head of marketing had their own set of priorities, but none of them had actually talked to each other. they weren't doing anything that was like objectively lined up to overall corporate objectives.
Yeah, that's when, at that 30 to 50 million level, I think that's where I found OKRs to be valuable. The
Right.
traction stuff, like that's when you need your level 10 meeting to get department heads all on the same page. Public OKRs that the whole company can sort of rally around. And then the next inflection point, I think, happens at around 100 employees. And that's kind of, we probably hit that last year sometime. But I found it to be a whole new challenge. Like we had our OKRs, we had our level 10 meetings, we had our all hands, but there were new things popping up. I think the company tends to become bureaucratic. Any company tends to become bureaucratic at that size. You need more processes to coordinate people. And that by nature, like adds a layer of complexity to the business where it's just often you see execution kind of slow down in various groups because they're too hung up on decision making and process.
Yeah, you have to actively fight against that and root it out as much as possible. It's inevitable that you'll have some, and you need coordination among teams, but keeping that from becoming a bloated bureaucracy is always a work in progress, always a challenge for companies. I think something else that, that transition between going from really small owner doing everything to delegation to scale, like real leadership scale. I don't remember where I heard this a long time ago, but it always stuck with me, was like, at first you want to think about who can I find to start delegating things to that can get it done 80% as well as I can, to at least be able to start taking it off my plate. Then as you start to scale to the next level, it's like, who can actually take on these functions and do a much better job than I ever could? That's the phase that I think we're at now as well, and that's just a big. I've always thought is a great way of thinking about those different phases of growth. First, just trying to get certain things off your plate, then building out just this crack leadership team that just crushes within their own area, their own domains.
Yeah, I think early on, we penned every email, every landing page, run meta ads ourselves. Then you go, fast forward to today, where we have the resources and we really need to hire people who are so specialized, even with, like you can't just hire a marketer. You need an email marketer. You need like a retention marketer, an acquisition marketer, a growth marketer, and they're way better and they know way more about what's going on and what's cutting edge than I do right now. And I don't want to know about that stuff, but that's kind of where we are. And the other thing I think you and I say a lot is culture eats strategy for breakfast. Like the most important thing is the culture. And I think when you get to 100 people, as a founder, your direct control really has waned. You can't, by force of will, like we joke about how we physically at times have had to carry the whole company up a mountain. In the early days, you feel like you're doing that. You're just like, you're the only one who gets the vision and you're trying to get this company up the side of a mountain. But like at 100 people, you just can't do it anymore. Like it's just too big. Like there's only so many hours in the day and everybody's remote. And it's like, I can't bear hug 100 people. So you got to fall back on culture. And it's like, I know when we hit 100, when we hit the Hondo, was kind of when I started thinking about like onboarding, core values, what, like, we got to illustrate our core values. How are we going to like train people in our core values, like customer centric, taking care of the customer, like things that we've picked up along the way. I mean, you and I, let's just talk about one of PostPilot's, like customer centricity, doing what's right and ownership, right, for the customer. And I think we picked that up from Danny Meyer, who runs Shake Shack in New York. And he's just run great restaurant after great restaurant. He's got this idea of like everybody at the whole company is empowered to pick up the sugar packet on the table. If a busboy walks by a table at Union Square Cafe and there's like a mess, the busboy picks it up, and it's like, at a big company or a big-ish, 100-person company, there are a lot of sugar packets out on the table. There's a lot of little messes that don't fit squarely within one person's area of responsibility. And so we really stress and we really recruit for, and we build a culture around ownership where, if you see something wrong, you got to fix it. You got to see it through until it's fixed, right? Whether it's in your department or not. So I found that at 100 people, really leaning back and focusing on the culture is pretty important.
Yeah. Another line that I like is culture is what happens when the boss isn't looking. And
yeah, which is pretty much everything now for us, right?
Right. So to your point, that is the only way to continue to execute at scale. One is, I think the two big takeaways that we landed on is frameworks to keep things organized and ensure the priorities are clear to the entire org and cascade down through each department using OKRs to keep everyone aligned, keep everyone rowing in the same direction, keep everyone focused on priorities that roll up to the overall corporate objectives and priorities, and then focusing on reinforcing that culture so that people know how to act and what the right thing to do is without you having to keep your eye on everything.
Yeah. All right. So here we are, 120 people or something. We're going to meet up. We're going to have a couple social events, some fun dinners at some good restaurants, and spend the day in Summit's office in Midtown. and get real with each other. So let's talk a little bit about how to run a good management team offsite.
Sure. And to your point, so much of the value when you have a remote culture is obviously just physically being there in person. It's just that alone, bonding and just continuing to nurture a lot of the relationships between these department heads and management team that all have so many dependencies on each other. You know, everyone's reliant on some other department or multiple other departments to be successful in their own job. So continuing to foster those relationships to keep those moving smoothly and executing well is super important. But specifically, I think the number one thing that doesn't work well for offsites and often leadership meetings in general is when you throw up an agenda live when everyone shows up.
Sure.
And they haven't had time to deeply think about the topics that you want to discuss. And then everyone just reacts in real time with whatever tends to be top of mind at that moment, or just they throw out whatever the first thing that comes to mind. And you go on these big tangents, and you end up becoming really inefficient with the time because you're just spitballing a whole bunch of stuff that you didn't have time to deeply think about in advance and really get to the core things that you want to discuss. So pre-work, number one, non-negotiable. Setting up that agenda and giving some folks some things to think about and prepare for in advance is probably my number one thing. I know we're doing some of that ahead of time. You did some interesting stuff around that, Drew.
We've done a lot of pre-work for this one. So first thing, we got the agenda in front of everybody a week ahead of time. We had everyone on the management team take a personality assessment to assess their work styles.
We've also grown the leadership team pretty significantly over the last 6 months. So you have a lot of new people, new personalities, people that haven't worked together, have no history of working together in the past. So I think the leadership assessment's been really great to help rapidly understand how to best communicate with each other and new personalities that, again, you don't have a history of working with.
Right. So we took this from Bridgewater, the big hedge fund. We all did one. We dropped them into a GPT, and now we can ask all sorts of questions about how each of us should coordinate with each other. You and I got some tips on how we can work together better. So I found the pre-work is non-negotiable. Personality assessment, another thing we did was a survey. So survey the company, survey the management team. And we really dug there. I mean, we asked them to be pretty honest on, what is going well, what isn't going well, who do you have conflicts with, where are things getting lost between departments. And we're going to take the results of those survey, and that's like the first half of the first day is like going over these surveys, identifying the top issues so that we can divide up in teams and sort of tackle these issues.
Yeah, I think it's getting what do we want to see more of from people? What's working really well, and how do we lean into those strengths? What are some of the weak spots that we have where maybe coordination isn't as tight as it could be, and how do we improve that level of coordination and collaboration?
Right. Okay, so that's pre-work. Second thing, structure for decisions, not discussions. What does that mean?
Yeah, I think, again, one of the things that tends to go poorly at various meetings or offsites is when you just talk about a bunch of things for a really long time, and then you get to the end and go, what did we actually decide here? What's the actionable takeaway that we are taking from that discussion? Otherwise, you just created a super expensive retreat or super expensive meeting because you just took your leadership team out of their daily workflow to just talk for a while.
Yeah. I mean, Amazon's got their memos that you need to bring to every meeting, and everybody's got to read the memo. I think we're going to do a little bit of that, but then I really like the entrepreneurial operating systems IDS portion of the level 10, which stands for identify, discuss, and solve. That solve is critical. Like allot time to discuss an issue, to sort of identify the issue, discuss it, and then you want to always conclude with that solve. And most of the time, I hate to spoil it. Most of the time, you don't have complete consensus on the management team, and you sort of have to get in the habit of just disagreeing and moving forward regardless. We'll agree to disagree, but we're going to decide on this. And I think we're going to do a lot of that next week.
Yeah, Amazon has the concept of disagree and commit. We are going to get all of our opinions on the table. When you have a big management team, maybe not everybody's going to agree on the solution, but the key is we're committed to a path forward.
Right.
We also have that agenda, and we have a structure so that, again, it just doesn't go off the rails where we end up going on a bunch of tangents for hours at a time. It's key to have that agenda, keep people on task, answer specific questions or go through specific exercises that are designed to achieve certain outcomes, and not just let it become sort of this free form discussion.
Yeah. So that leads into our third tip, which is having the right agenda for the days. I know what ours is. Essentially, we're going to present the problems and the survey results first. Like, hey, here's the challenges that we see as leaders that were revealed in the survey. Then we are going to have a discussion and breakout sessions to discuss various issues. If breakout sessions, if they're only pertaining to one or two people there. And then we come together to talk about to decide and who's going to own what out of that decision and discuss execution. So those are the three sections to our day.
Yeah. And having a facilitator that keeps people on task, on topic, and moving through the agenda properly is a key part of just the overall workflow of the day.
Yeah. And I would say keep it under 6 hours. I mean, these things can really they can tire you out. We're going to have caffeine. We're going to have tons of coffee, cigarettes, whatever, we're going to have bagels. Everything is going to be in this room. I think we're in the room for breakfast and lunch. So there's a bit of escape room mentality. But then hopefully we wrap up early afternoon and can, go out into New York and then have a nice dinner together, or go to dodgeball. I think the first night is what we're lining up. Okay. That brings us to the fourth tip, and that's use a decision-making framework.
Yeah. So maybe a RACI, you want to use a RACI where once you've decided on this path forward, making sure that there's clear accountability, who owns what, who needs to be involved in executing those decisions, clear recap of what was decided. So specifically, what was the action? What is the next step? Who is responsible for it? And then a commitment from those folks. It sounds cheesy, but we always see recommended, have people sign off on it potentially, something that just really formalizes that commitment to what was decided in that conversation.
Yeah, we like to take out a knife and cut our arms and bleed onto a piece of paper.
Yeah,
to show the commitment.
That's
but
right.
Other companies might do it a different way. That's how we do it at PostPilot. Great. So, I'm excited about the offsite next week. It should provide some, a boost to go through the second half of the year, which I'm really excited about.
I am too. The stuff we've got going on right now, we've been releasing a lot of new things, both that customers can see and behind the scenes, to improve both performance and our efficiency. And the stuff we've got in the works right now continues to be some of the most exciting things I've ever worked on in my career. So can't wait to see that come out over the next quarter, and excited to get the team all rallied behind it.
Awesome.
So I think that's it, Drew. We've gone through a lot of these phases of growth, and we know that the people listening are at different phases, whether they're smaller startups or whether they're established companies. But hopefully this gave you a bit of a mental model to think about how to structure the org and improve overall alignment, no matter what stage you're in. You can always use more clarity, always use more alignment as your team continues to grow. And I know a lot of folks that are at offsites right now. So hopefully this is helpful to folks who might be planning one in the future. If you have tips or ideas for how you've run successful offsites, shoot us a note too. We'd love to hear it.
That's awesome.